Okay, so I wanted to quickly rant just a little bit. This is my rant about space. And I don't mean outer space. I mean how much room is available to captive organisms. And I'm also going to eat this banana. Um, so, long ago, a friend of mine wanted to keep house centipedes as pets. And at my house, we would occasionally see them, so I would capture them. And I'd keep them in these deli cups. And they wouldn't live for very long in those deli cups. They would die invariably after about a week. Now, fast forward to nowadays, and I had been in Rhode Island for a while, rearing Odontomantis micans. And in Rhode Island, it's nice and humid. Um, it's rainy all the time, air's nice and moist. I was keeping Odontomantis in net cages, those big cubes made of netting. That's a really good banana. And they were doing really, really well. They were eating, molting, and mating, and making a ton of babies. Then I moved to Colorado. Colorado is very, very dry. And what I found was I had these Odontomantis, and I was rearing them in deli cups. And guess what? They were languishing. And I was trying to figure out where I was going wrong. Now, Odontomantis are very tiny. They are about this big as adults. Like, not even an inch long. They're super, super small. And so, to me, it didn't make sense to keep them in giant containers at the time. Because net cages are very airy, and so in order to provide them the proper humidity in a net cage, I'd have to mist, like 4 times a day. Nowadays, I have grow tents that help hold in the humidity, and so that issue is solved. But before I got the grow tents, I was having, to mist anything that was in a net cage constantly, and that was, very time consuming, and I had very limited time. And so I had just a little bit of a conundrum on what to do. And I had realized a couple things about Odontomantis. And I'm going to get back to the house centipede thing in a moment. But, as well as another species. So, Odontomantis, even though they're really small, they're really fucking neurotic. They love to dart about, jumping, running, scuttling around. They move around a lot. And they eat a lot relative to their small size, probably because they burn so much energy by zipping around. And so I got more Odontomantis, and I've been having really, really good success rearing them in the net cubes. They're doing phenomenally in the net cubes. And when I had a mated Phidippus audax, by the way, Phidippus really loved my house. Probably because of all the loose feeder insects that inevitably end up all over the goddamn place. But always in the fall I'm finding pregnant Phidippus audax. We also have Phidippus regius in Colorado. I know traditionally people are like, oh, well, Phidippus regius is only, in the southeastern United States. Well, 2 things. One, Phidippus are highly motile, and they're probably shipped all across the goddamn country on plants and trucks and shit like that. But also, climate change is making a lot of things expand their ranges, and so, I think that information's outdated. But anyway, I caught a pregnant female Phidippus audax in my house, and she laid an egg sac. I released her and most of the babies outside, but then I kept a few, about 30 of her babies. I kept them in these 4-ounce portion cups that had a couple of holes soldered into the lids, and like a little piece of fake plant in there and things like that. They fucking languished. They, one by one, died out pretty darn quickly, even though they were eating and, acting otherwise normal. Fast forward, I had a roommate who insisted that I keep the cockroach colonies outside for the summer. Not going to talk about that. Not going to talk about that. But when I brought the cockroach colonies back in, there were egg masses of Regius and Audax in the colonies that had hatched out into a big grow tent. And guess what? Huge success with just letting those babies be in that very, very large grow tent. And I suspect, just like with house centipedes and just like with odontomantids, that space was a factor. I think with house centipedes, just given their nature, they are, kind of secretive. They like to move about different, like, high and low levels of the house. I suspect that they need a lot of space for, like, thermoregulation purposes, metabolic regulation, finding food, finding moisture, blah, blah, blah. And I suspect that being confined to a small space doesn't give them that microclimatic variety that they actually require. I suspect, too, with some of these, like the Phidippus and the Odontomantis, they're stressed too much if they're in a confined space because they really are very, very active animals. And so don't let an animal's small size fool you. There are species that seem to need a lot of space relative to their size. And, it's kind of counterintuitive, especially like mantises. You think of them as, like ambush predators. And, I've raised humongous, like 5-inch polyspilata and things like that in gallon jugs without any problems. They'll even oviposit in those fucking tiny containers. But it seems that some species, and you really got to be attuned to what species you're dealing with. I think Catharomantis and some of the other Acromantis things, as well as Odontomantis, need just a lot more space relative to their size than a lot of other species like Creobrata, like Caragula, and things that are more sit-and-wait predators. And so I wanted to just briefly talk about space because one of the things that I've noticed is that some species that I can't keep alive in small plastic containers, even though the plastic container seems a great deal larger than that organism, do just fine when they are given a lot more space. And I encourage people to go ahead and, you know, test this out. Things that seem to stress out and die very easily. Put it in, and next generation of the Odontomantis, they're pre-sub and sub now. I'm going to use a like big plastic container. I don't know if it's the aeration or the space or both. So if I put Odontomantis nymphs in a plastic container with some ventilation but plastic that's the same size as the net cube and they don't do as well, then I know it's not just the space. It's got to be also, hey, there's a lot of airflow moving around them. They're doing better because of that. Whatever. I'll figure it out. But my basic point here is that sometimes things that look like they wouldn't require a lot of space do actually require a lot of space. And just be aware of that.